So what does it mean to become a whole man? I feel like society is split into two categories, which both possess half-truths but miss the entire truth. And through understanding Carl Jung's teachings, we can actually understand what it truly means to become a whole, well-rounded, and well-developed man. So on one side of the spectrum, we have the Andrew Tate type archetype, which is absolute masculinity to really develop your strength, courage, discipline, dominance, and all of the masculine dominating traits. And it's just through developing these you become a whole man. I largely agree with that, but it is missing some important truths. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have the more compassionate types, which is that men need to understand their emotions. They need to become more emotionally intelligent, more emotionally aware. They need to be more compassionate, empathetic, understanding, considerate, and all of the more feminine or traditionally feminine traits. Now, there is, again, a degree of truth in this, but they are missing a large part of the argument that Tate and those masculine types understand. And Tate's side of the argument and the masculine dominant side of the argument is really missing some elements from this other side of the spectrum. So let's actually get into Carl Jung's teachings around this. So essentially, within every man and within every woman, there are two main, I guess you could say, like ethos, or like two main, spiritual types of energy, if you want to call it that, which some people refer to it as. So on one side, we have the feminine, and on one side, we have the masculine. Now, what society is doing at the moment, largely, is trying, and I'm talking about the more mainstream narrative, is that it's actually confusing the two sides of the argument. We're telling women that they need to be more masculine, they need to go out, get a career, they need to thrive in their career, make a lot of money, and you don't really need a man to fulfill those needs, which, I mean, it's true, they don't need a man to fulfill those needs. But does that fill up their spiritual cup? We'll find out in a moment. On the other side of the spectrum, the mainstream media is telling men that they have to be more feminine, right? They have to stop being so dominant, stop being so aggressive. They have to understand their emotions, channel their emotions, and be more emotionally intelligent, more compassionate, more empathetic, and more understanding. Now, the issue with this is that it misses the entire picture and the innate and inherent being of a man and a woman. Now, I'm not saying this counts for everyone, but for the majority of the population, this is going to be true. Now, the interesting thing is that Carl Jung suggested that within the unconscious of every human being, we have what is known as the shadow, which are the repressed parts of ourselves that live unconsciously through us and manifest in unconscious ways. Now, the feminine part of every man is known as the anima. Now, the anima can display itself in a number of different scenarios. For example, men who are more emotionally erratic, men who are more, we'll just stick with emotionally erratic, right? Men who don't know how to handle their emotions, they throw out in fits of emotion. These are the men who have their anima really manifesting in unconscious ways that they aren't aware of. And so what we can take from this is that we can understand the path of development as a man. Now, although society is trying to tell men that you have to develop your feminine side, the truth is you can't develop the feminine side before first developing the masculine side. Because otherwise you just become a completely emotionally erratic man with no control over his, strength, inner strength. Because you need that strength to contain this emotional intelligence and the emotions themselves. So really, what I'm trying to say here is that as a man, the path to becoming a whole man is to first and foremost develop your masculinity, which means, again, developing your strength, your dominance, your courage, your discipline. And you can do that through more masculine endeavors, through competition, right? That's a large way that you can develop your masculinity and your courage and strength and competitive nature. Through training, competitive sports, through business, or, ascending the hierarchy of your career and trying to grow in your career, build financial wealth. Overall, you're trying to build the character traits of strength, courage, discipline, and dominance, and directness. Now, you build this first, and this should make up for 80% of your personality. And this is obviously important if you want to really thrive in the competitive landscape of life as a man, because otherwise you'll be pushed to the lowest rung of, the social or sexual hierarchy, which unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, is a thing, okay? Because of the fact that women are the ones who bear the brunt of reproductive, costs, right? if they are impregnated by a man, they have greater cost than the man. Obviously, you can argue like after a divorce that men might have more of a cost. That's out of the picture. I'm talking from a purely biological perspective. Women have to take the burden of actually physically developing the child, giving birth to the child, and then raising the child. And so they get to set the standard as to who they like to date or who they select in the sexual marketplace. So men have to compete, okay? Now, once you've developed that, you can begin to develop the remaining 20%, which is the anima, or the feminine side of yourself. The reason this is important is because you have to still have the traits of compassion, empathy, and emotional intelligence to be a fully rounded man. Otherwise, you just have like this strength and like this masculine energy that isn't contained with any form of emotional intelligence. Now, there are cases where this can be okay, but when it comes to things like romantic relationships or relationships and interpersonal dynamics within, your career, for example, you need to have these traits in order to be fully well-rounded. Otherwise, especially in a romantic relationship, you won't be able to understand your partner fully and deeply connect with them because you won't have the emotional intelligence to communicate with them, to understand what they're going through, and to be supportive in the realm that matters most to them, which is the emotional realm, okay? So by developing first your masculine side, you can then develop the feminine side and become a well-rounded man, but you have to understand that you have to go through it in that stage. You have to do this first, and you have to do this second, regardless of what society's trying to tell you. Because if you try to develop your feminine first, you won't have the masculine capacity to be a fully well-rounded man, and you will become one of the more like the types of men who are subdued, the types of men who don't have any form of dominance. They don't have any form of, real strength or courage. And those men, unfortunately, or fortunately, again, depending on how you want to look at it, will be pushed to the bottom of the social and more importantly, sexual marketplace, okay? And of course, just the social hierarchy as a whole, because you won't have the drive and push for growth in your career, financial growth, physical growth, mental growth, relational growth, all the things, okay? Anyway, that is what I believe and what Carl Jung believes is the process of becoming a whole man. Hopefully that was valuable. If it was, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.